asesino. La historia del peor desastre marítimo se inició en Hamburgo, Alemania, el 5 de mayo de 1938, con la botadura del Wilhelm Gustlof. Para el exultante Adolfo Hitler era un sueño nazi hecho realidad. Un buque de pasajeros último modelo construido para premiar a los obreros con vacaciones remuneradas. Pero el Gustlof era más que un transatlántico que ofrecía vacaciones gratis. Era un instrumento en el plan de Hitler concebido para lavarle el cerebro al público alemán con ideales nazistas.
Deutschland wird leben und Deutschland wird deshalb siegen.
The Gustlof is just another manifestation of this one race, a master race, one people. And you can't have one people unless everyone understands the Nazi program, the Nazi politic, and where they fit in it. The Gustlof became a good setting for Nazi propaganda because it showed to the German people the life they can have if they work hard.
El buque de propaganda de Hitler transportaba para los puertos más atrayentes del mundo tropas y obreros que encarnaban el ideal de la ética nazi sobre el trabajo.
Achtung, Achtung, meine lieben Urlaubskameraden.
Durante días y noches colmados de placer, disfrutaban del sabor de la buena vida. Había abundancia de comida y de bailes. Además, eran invitados a dar conferencias sobre los planes de Hitler. Pero tras la apariencia de un estado totalitario feliz y de vacaciones gratis, se extendía una siniestra conspiración.
Yes, it had a swimming pool, yes, it had a bandstand, but from the outset, this ship was intended to be a military troop transport, pure and simple.
Después de 14 meses como el crucero nazi del amor, la fiesta llegó a su fin. 1 de septiembre de 1939, Hitler dio inicio a la Segunda Guerra Mundial. En cuestión de días, Polonia sucumbió. Gotenhafen, puerto situado en el Golfo de Danzig, se convirtió en una fortaleza de la Armada Alemana en el Báltico. Allí, el Gustlof inició sus funciones como buque de escuela de los submarinos alemanes.
The massive submarine production program that they had required thousands of highly trained submarine officers and enlisted men. The Gustlof was one of several ships that they converted to schoolhouses. Submarine candidates, officer cadets, and some enlisted men lived on board. It was an accommodation ship. But in this respect, the Gustlof had a very important role in helping to prepare these young men for submarine service.
Junio de 1941, la Unión Soviética, neutral ante la conquista de Europa Occidental por parte de Hitler, se vio obligada a entrar en la guerra cuando Alemania invadió sus fronteras. En el frente oriental tenía lugar la contienda más brutal de la guerra.
Well, the established from the German side was simply that the Russians have to be reduced to a slave population, and if millions of them die, it really doesn't matter. Hitler told the German officers at the beginning of the invasion of Russia that the Russian is no comrade. These are people of a different breed, and you don't have to treat them as comrades at war. The Germans had really the right to kill any Russians they wanted.
En el mar Báltico, buques de guerra alemanes y campos minados devastaban a la Armada Soviética, particularmente a sus submarinos.
2 weeks into the war, 11 Soviet submarines had been lost, and within 6 months, 27 boats had gone down. This represents about a third of the Soviet submarine force in June of 1941. As a result, Soviet submarines attempted less frequently to run the minefields and, in effect, became a non-participant in the war.
En tierra firme la guerra era igualmente desastrosa. Las ciudades de Kharkov, Kiev y Odessa cayeron en poder del enemigo. Leningrado fue sitiada.
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people dying from hunger, illness, infection, pneumonia from the German bombardment. Day and night, German artillery is blasting the city. The situation in Leningrad is almost as if it were hit by an atomic bomb. People are reduced to eating, I can't say rats and mice because they went in the first month or two, but leather, because leather has some animal nourishment in it. But Leningrad holds out. It is a hero city.
Después de 900 días, el estado de sitio fracasó. Una contraofensiva del Ejército Rojo hizo retroceder y obligó a rendirse a los alemanes. El curso de la guerra había cambiado. Al regreso, le había llegado el momento de la venganza a Rusia. No habría piedad ni en la tierra ni en el mar.
It was savagery at a level that Europe had not known since the Middle Ages.
Octubre de 1944. Los alemanes habían perdido más de 1 millón de hombres en Rusia desde el inicio de la guerra. Las bajas de los soviéticos podían elevarse a 9 millones de soldados y marinos muertos y a 20 millones de civiles. Y la matanza aún no había terminado. El Ejército Rojo quería vengarse.
When the Soviets went on the counterattack to recapture their land, and they saw what the Germans had done to the land, to the people, to the cities, the towns, the devastation, the destruction, the murder, the mass graves, they in turn wanted to inflict more. They wanted greater than revenge on the Germans.
When they started moving into Poland, then into East Prussia and into Germany, and meeting less and less resistance, they went wild. They began to kill, they began to burn, they began to rape. And that brutalization was terrible.
Los rusos cercaron Gotenhafen, donde el Gustlof entrenaba a las tripulaciones de los submarinos. Irene Kusobotska, quien para ese entonces tenía 11 años, recuerda el horror de los ataques aéreos de los soviéticos.
Once when we were bombed, we went to the market one day and there laid a hand. Somebody's hand had been cut off and laid there beside a big hole where the bomb went in.
Mientras el Ejército Rojo llevaba a cabo una ofensiva en el oeste, los submarinos soviéticos atrapados en puerto durante 3 años finalmente regresaban al mar Báltico. Uno de estos era el S-13, un submarino de ataque de alcance intermedio. Con una longitud de 78 metros podía sumergirse a profundidad de periscopio 12.2 metros en 45 segundos. Su velocidad de unos 8 nudos bajo la superficie del mar y 18 nudos en la superficie era menor que la de sus equivalentes alemanes. Su tripulación era de 46 hombres, todos ansiosos por regresar a la guerra. Uno de ellos era Fyodor Davidov, de 18 años y designado para el cuarto de torpedos.
During that time, the mood among our crew was patriotic. Patriotism to protect one's own motherland. And now, once back at sea, more than anything else, we wanted revenge.
Puesto que la tripulación del submarino soviético S-13 había estado en puerto durante tanto tiempo, trabajaba más para compensar el entrenamiento perdido y la experiencia táctica. Pero el mar, por sí mismo un obstáculo, era un problema que no podía superar. El Báltico era un mal lugar para los submarinos.
The worst feature is how shallow it is in places, 100 feet, 200 feet, when you're a few miles offshore. Submarine stays close to the surface to do its job, to look for ships, to shoot torpedoes. But once it's made an attack, it wants to go deep, 200 or 300 feet.
El S-13 aún seguía impertérrito, con 12 torpedos, cada uno de 7 metros de longitud y cargado de 300 kilogramos de TNT, transportaba una carga mortal, pero su arma más letal era su capitán. Alexander Marinesko, de 32 años. Fyodor Davidov, el último sobreviviente de los tripulantes del submarino de Marinesko, recuerda a su capitán.
Marinesko was a very confident commander. He always felt comfortable at sea. He believed in his crew and that the boat under his command would do whatever he said. We were in situations when German subs attacked us, launched torpedoes at us, and even were attacked by planes. His orders always got us out alive.
Pero el capitán Marinesco no era apropiado para la Armada Soviética. Era un inconformista, empeñado en dirigir el submarino a su manera. Por otra parte, sus superiores exigían ciega obediencia y desdeñaban su pensamiento independiente, así como sus acciones. Pero eran las cualidades que ellos menospreciaban las que hacían de él un gran capitán.
Marinesco had a gift, a natural gift of bravery. He was sure of himself. He always knew what to do in battle. He was decisive, and that helped him always beat his opponent at critical moments.
Noviembre de 1944. Finlandia se había cambiado del bando alemán al soviético. Su puerto de Turku era una base ideal para los submarinos, pues se encontraba libre de minas y más cerca de los barcos alemanes. A Marinesco se le había ordenado que llevara hasta allí el S-13, pero cientos de minas estaban en su trayectoria. El viaje era tan arriesgado que casi 4 torpedos, suficientes para una salva, fueron sacados de la nave. Según la lógica soviética, si el S-13 se hundía, su dotación completa de 12 torpedos no se malgastaría. Cruzar un campo minado resultaba muy peligroso.
Sailors would be totally quiet, not because noise could activate the mines. They were contact mines. The submarine had to brush it to make it explode. But they would be still and quiet because they were petrified with fear. Everything's closed up. The men are standing at their battle stations, ready to jump for the hatch. The boat's going slowly, 2, 3, 4, 5 knots at most. Traversing the minefield could take a couple of hours. Then there might be another one, and a third one, depending upon what area they were in. Not very good for your coronary system.
Gracias a la habilidad y a la suerte del capitán Marinesco, el S-13 llegó sin novedad al Turku. La tripulación entera celebró a la rusa. Pronto, al capitán Marinesco se le ordenó patrullar el Báltico Oriental y hundir cualquier cosa que fuese alemana. El submarino fue cargado con torpedos para la batalla. Había suficiente comida a bordo para 45 días en el mar. Se tenía previsto que el S-13 saliese a patrullar junto con otros 3 submarinos soviéticos el 2 de enero de 1945, pero 2 días antes de la partida, Marinesco desapareció.
He was at a drunken binge inside a Finnish bordello and missed the assignment. The crew found Marinesco, dried him out in a sauna. The other submarines with which they were supposed to operate had left.
La Policía de Seguridad Soviética, la NKVD, estaba indignada. Querían que la comitiva de Marinesco fuese reunida y embarcada a Siberia, pero la más pragmática de las armadas decidió que incluso un descontrolado capitán era más útil en el mar que en Siberia.
He was at a drunken binge inside a Finnish bordello and missed the assignment. The crew found Marinesco, dried him out in a sauna. The other submarines with which they were supposed to operate had left.
Con un poco de suerte, Marinesco tendría la oportunidad de hacer justo eso. Al regreso, la desobediencia y la dilación llevaron al S-13 a un funesto rumbo, acompañado del Gustlof.
There were masses of people. They were all on top of you and beside you, and you just kept going down and drinking till you thought your lungs were going to burst.
17 de enero de 1945. El capitán Marinesco se encontraba en el mar, en el Báltico. Tras haber sido reprendido por embriagarse y por negligencia en el cumplimiento del deber, necesitaba algún triunfo. Precisaba de cualquier forma hundir un barco alemán. Pero después de 8 días de cacería, Marinesco no encontró barcos enemigos, enrumbándose entonces a la costa de la Polonia ocupada por los alemanes y al puerto de Gotenhafen, una importante base naval alemana y hogar del Gustlof.
There was a high concentration of German ships and warships doing a good job guarding them there. But Marinesco went anyway. He went to the epicenter of the war at sea. It was a big risk because the Germans had enough sea power to find the submarine very easily.
El capitán Marinesco se dirigía a una zona de guerra tan peligrosa, la Armada Soviética la había evitado. Temiendo se le ordenara alejarse o le reprendiera por abandonar su área asignada, Marinesco decidió actuar por su cuenta, sin preguntar o incluso informar a sus superiores. Para el capitán del S-13, el riesgo era la mejor parte del valor. Al mismo tiempo que el submarino soviético se dirigía hacia el puerto de Gotenhafen, el almirante alemán Karl Dönitz ordenaba la evacuación de 2,5 millones de alemanes, la mayor evacuación de la historia, desde el otro lado del mar Báltico hasta la parte occidental de Alemania.
As the Red Army moved westward, there were pockets of German-occupied areas in the Baltic states, in Poland. The area around Danzig was one of these, and immediately tens of thousands of refugees, troops, poured into Danzig and the adjacent cities. Admiral Dönitz initiated Operation Hannibal, which sent scores of warships, transports, cargo ships into these pockets to pull out primarily troops, then women and children, and then everyone else.
Los refugiados alemanes llegaban a pie, en coches de caballos, en automóviles y en cualquier cosa que se moviera a Gotenhafen para abordar los barcos de evacuación y dirigirse al oeste. Paul Niehaus, entonces marinero de la Armada alemana, recuerda el pandemonium.
Everybody knew the war is lost and the Russians are coming. They had heard many stories of injuries, killing, raping women. It was a panic that had come over the population.
El Gustlof, que alguna vez había sido un transatlántico y posteriormente una escuela submarina, era entonces un barco de refugiados. Se habían hecho los preparativos finales para asegurar los botes y chalecos salvavidas para la travesía. Más de 10,000 personas atestaban un barco construido con capacidad para 1,400 personas. Se ocupó cada centímetro y se había creado una guardería en la terraza para 2 docenas de mujeres embarazadas. En una piscina vacía, 373 jóvenes mujeres, que integraban las tropas auxiliares navales, ocupaban un dormitorio provisional. En el salón principal se apiñaban varios cientos de mujeres y de niños, entre los que se encontraban Sima Kusobotska y su hija Irene, de 11 años, Ellen, de 6 años, y su prima Evelyn, de 13 años. Irene recuerda el día en que el Gustlof abandonó Gotenhafen rumbo a Kiel el 30 de enero de 1945.
Men had to stay behind, so Dad stayed behind. There were over 3,000 children and their mothers on board, plus wounded soldiers. We got on board and apparently we left in the early afternoon. It would be just like a day's trip. We were to go on board and do not get undressed because we'll be there the next morning.
El tiempo era crudo, nevaba y el viento era fuerte. Los mares eran violentos y la temperatura era de 18 grados bajo cero. Poco después de la 1 de la tarde, el Gustlof abandonó Gotenhafen.
Despite the cramming in the ship, despite the snow, the cold, the lack of food, there's got to have been a frightening sense of safety. At last we made it. We're on our way to the fatherland. We're the lucky ones.
Se suponía que el Gustlof saldría con 3 escoltas, pero 2 de ellos se habían retrasado y esperarlos habría implicado arriesgarse al ataque de la artillería y de los aviones rusos. Debía partir con un solo escolta. En el barco había 2 oficiales, el capitán Frederick Petersen, quien dirigía al Gustlof, y el capitán de corbeta Wilhelm, quien estaba a cargo de los 1,000 cadetes del submarino a bordo. En el puente ellos discutían sobre las rutas a seguir. Heinz Schön, quien para ese entonces tenía 18 años, recuerda la fatídica discusión.
Captain Peterson and Lieutenant Commander Zahn didn't agree on the course to take. One was further out into the Baltic, which was considered less dangerous, but it was longer. The other was a shorter course along the coast, but one littered with mines.
Zahn insistía en tomar la ruta más corta, más cercana a la costa para traer de vuelta a los 1,000 cadetes de submarino del Gustlof. Ellos necesitaban tripular una nueva flota de submarinos alemanes con la cual Hitler se había comprometido a ganar la guerra. Además, como capitán de corbeta de un submarino alemán, Zahn descartaba cualquier peligro de los submarinos. Creía que la armada soviética había sido aniquilada e incluso si algo de ella hubiese quedado, ningún capitán de submarino en sus cabales habría atacado tan cerca de la costa.
Being closer inshore, you're a more difficult target for the submarines because submarines are, 1, submerged, 2, they like to have a couple of 100 feet of water under their keel after they attack so they can go deep to escape.
Solo había que temer a las minas. Las radios del barco pidieron ayuda para avanzar.
At 1800 hours, there was a message that a flotilla of German minesweepers were bearing down on an easterly course. The Wilhelm Gustlof was, of course, heading west. This was considered adding a danger of collision, so it was decided to put the position lights on.
Entre tanto, el submarino soviético hacía algo inesperado. El capitán Marinesco estaba exactamente donde Zahn y otros creyeron que ningún submarino avanzaría bordeando la costa en aguas poco profundas. Las luces de ubicación del Gustlof, con las que se quería ayudar al barco, eran una invitación al desastre. Justo antes de las 8 de la noche, Marinesco las distinguió. Con el elemento sorpresa de su lado, se acercó más. Al abrigo de la oscuridad y del tiempo, el pequeño submarino era prácticamente invisible. Marinesco vio el objetivo más grande de su vida a 273 metros, pero el ataque era muy arriesgado.
He saw an escort on the Gustlof's ocean side, a dangerous escort. For that reason, he decided to put his boat away from it on the other side and away from any threat of retaliation.
Pero había solo una forma, una vía peligrosa de lograr esto. El capitán Marinesco tenía que sumergir el S-13 por debajo del Gustlof, en aguas de apenas 52 metros de profundidad, cuando el S-13 requería idealmente 122 metros.
One mistake and he could have gotten stuck. It was a risk, but we say if you don't risk, you don't drink champagne.
En una noche sin luna, con escasa visibilidad, el S-13 emergió en posición de ataque por el lado de la costa. Eran entonces las 8 de la noche en el Gustlof. Al parecer todo estaba bien. Los pasajeros dormían o intentaban hacerlo. Uno de ellos era la joven Helen Kusobotka.
I was wearing a white fur coat underneath this stupid life jacket that I desperately wanted to take off, and I was crying and crying, and my mother wouldn't let me take it off.
Con Helen estaba su hermana mayor, Irene.
We boarded the ship. We were put into this big salon. We just stayed and were good as gold, I suppose, and we didn't have any food as I can remember. There was just this big empty room with this grand piano. And so therefore we laid against the walls because there were no chairs, and had our life jackets on, and we sort of lulled to sleep, I guess, towards the evening.
Mientras el Gustlof iba en dirección oeste a 12 horas de Puerto Seguro, el capitán Marinesco lo seguía de cerca a 455 metros. Esperaba atacar con la expectativa de entrar en aguas más profundas donde pudiese escapar sin peligro. Hasta entonces el fondo era aún poco profundo. Marinesco sabía que no podía esperar eternamente. Debía decidir pronto entre renunciar a esa oportunidad o arriesgarse en el poco profundo Báltico. A esa misma hora, a 402 kilómetros en Berlín, Adolfo Hitler pronunciaba un discurso para conmemorar el 30 de enero, el 12º aniversario de su ascensión al poder. El discurso también se escuchó en el Gustlof.
You have then the situation of 6, 7, 8, 9,000 passengers. The crew of the ship, the officers, the sailors, they know they've made it. They're safe. They're en route home to Germany, to the fatherland. You even have a certain inner warmth, I'm sure, with some of the people, certainly not all, that were on the ship that night, as they hear Hitler's words. Not only are they going home, but there's still a hope for victory.
A las 9 de la noche, un estruendoso aplauso marcó el final del discurso de Hitler y resonó a través del Gustlof. En ese momento, el capitán soviético Marinesco decidió atacar. Pocos minutos después de las 9 ordenó una descarga de torpedo que estaba a punto de convertir el 30 de enero de 1945 en la más cruel de las noches que el Báltico presenciara jamás.
Crewman Kurochkin sent the first and second torpedoes. Then on the left side, we tried to launch the third torpedo, but it didn't go, so we tried the fourth.
3 torpedos se enfilaron hacia el Gustlof. Los 90 segundos que precedían el impacto corrían velozmente. Al regreso, el Gustlof se hundió en el gélido Báltico y para el alba, el peor desastre marítimo pasaría a la historia.
1,000, 2,000 probably died within minutes.
1945. El Gustlof estaba atestado de más de 10.000 refugiados alemanes y personal militar rumbo al mar Báltico. Era una gélida noche de invierno. Después de días de miedo y de incertidumbre, finalmente había surgido una sensación de paz. Al día siguiente, estarían a salvo en Stettin y en Kiel. Justo después de las 9 de la noche, Heinz Schön, un marinero de 18 años del Gustlof, finalizaba su guardia.
I felt a large explosion. I thought we hit a mine. But then there was a second and a third explosion. It was obvious that the ship was severely damaged. The lights were out. The ship was listing sharply, and she was not making any speed. Then I knew it was a torpedo.
El barco que se balanceaba a babor despertó a Irene Kusobotka, de 11 años. Ella estaba en brazos de su madre junto con su hermana Ellen y su prima Evelyn.
We felt the hit, and everything listed all at once. We were thrown against the wall, like we were already against the wall, but it would have been hard to get up. And in a few seconds, the ship straightened itself, but not before I could see that thing, that piano rolling down towards us. And I thought, boy, it's in our path.
Al principio la cubierta superior estaba extrañamente tranquila y silenciosa, pero debajo de la línea de flotación del barco se había iniciado una catástrofe.
If you're in a lower deck, water, panic, pandemonium. Some people frantically fought, scratching at doors that were locked or closed at least, pushing their way over masses of humanity to get topside, to get to a life jacket, to get to a life raft. 1,000, 2,000 probably died within minutes as the torpedoes exploded, as the freezing water rushed in to the lower decks.
A través de enormes agujeros en la proa del barco y en el cuarto de máquinas, el mar entraba precipitadamente. Entre los primeros en morir estaban 300 auxiliares de tropas femeninas, quienes yacían acostadas en un dormitorio provisional. En un esfuerzo por salvar el barco, el capitán dio una orden que condenó a cientos de personas bajo cubierta.
The captain ordered the bow sections closed so that nobody had a chance to get out, even if they were alive. Later I learned those who didn't drown right away suffocated, maybe as long as 48 hours later.
El desastre se propagó hacia arriba, desde el fondo del barco hasta que el Gustlof se sumió completamente en el pánico y el caos. Miles de personas, temiendo su suerte, corrieron a ponerse a salvo en la cubierta superior.
There was a panicking mass of people trying to get through the halls to the deck. I saw a layer of bodies, mostly children, who had been stampeded by people trying to get out.
Toda orden se vino abajo. La supervivencia era un asunto del azar.
Aboard the Gustlof that night, terror reigned because everyone knew there was no way they could be saved.
En medio del pánico que azotaba el barco, Ellen Kusobotka, de 6 años, su hermana Irene, su prima Evelyn y su madre lucharon con la multitud por la cubierta superior.
We were just lucky that we weren't given a cabin and sent down below, because I understand that they didn't have a chance. Because the narrow hallways and little small cabins, they never got out. We were just lucky that we were only allowed to sleep on the dining room floor.
All I can tell you is that we were near the chimney, because when we let go, we just slid down the deck onto the chimney, and the huge waves washed us into the sea. And we kept on sinking. Well, at least I did. I kept on sinking and sinking, and it was as if my lungs were going to burst. All at once I was up again. So what do? You start swimming.
No había suficientes botes salvavidas para todos los pasajeros. Muchos, que estaban abarrotados, se estrellaron contra el mar. A medida que disminuía el número de botes, estallaba la violencia.
1,000 people tried to get into the last lifeboat. There were shootouts. People were shooting each other to secure a place on the boat.
Los botes que alcanzaban el agua se rehusaban a ayudar a quienes se estaban ahogando.
There were pontoon boats near us, and we tried to hang on, and they flung our hands off, because I don't blame them. They wanted to be saved themselves.
La muerte reinaba en el agua y en las cubiertas. Tan absoluta era la desesperación que muchas personas empezaron a suicidarse.
Up on deck was the family of a high-ranking Nazi official. His wife begged him to kill the family, which he did. He shot his 2 children and her. Then he put the pistol to his own head, but he was out of bullets. So he called to me and asked me to do it for him, or give him my pistol. But I told him I didn't have a gun. So he let go of the railing and just slid into the water after his wife and 2 children, and drowned.
A lo lejos, el capitán marinesco observaba el siniestro.
War is war. Somebody wins, somebody loses. We could have been sunk, but it was their turn.
En medio del mar glacial, surgió la hipotermia. Era solo cuestión de minutos antes de que la muerte acallara los cientos de alaridos que estallaban en la oscuridad sobre el agua.
There were masses of people. They were all on top of you and beside you, and you just kept going down and down and drinking till you thought your lungs were going to burst, and all at once you're up again, and it's all because of the life jacket. Otherwise, I would have been gone.
En menos de media hora, los primeros barcos llegaron al lugar de los hechos para rescatar a los sobrevivientes, pero para muchos era demasiado tarde.
They had lowered a rope, and a woman ahead of me was to be pulled up. And she grabbed it with both hands and was being pulled up. And she was, I don't know how many feet up, but her hands let go. They must have been too cold. She fell down in front of me and hit the side of the lifeboat and just disappeared in the water. And then I was next. I had to be pulled up, so they never found her.
Entre los muertos se encontraban Ellen y Evelyn, la prima de 13 años de Irene.
We were told that all the bodies which washed on shore were put in mass graves, and I don't even know where they are. I sure would like to visit it.
«50 minutos después del ataque, el Gustlof empezó a hundirse. De pronto sus luces se encendieron. En medio de los barcos de rescate y de los pasajeros que se estaban ahogando, la luz del buque que se hundía reveló una aterradora silueta, la del submarino de Marinesco.
The most unreal thing that happened was that in the middle of these people who were fighting for the rest of their lives was Marinesco on the surface of the water. He was in the middle of all these swimming casualties because the 4th torpedo had not left the boat and got stuck. They manned the gun in the foresection of the submarine, and some of the people in the water were afraid they would now shoot at the survivors in the water.
El capitán marinesco no disparó. El cañón de la cubierta estaba atendido, pero la tripulación se precipitaba a alistar de nuevo el atascado torpedo dentro del submarino. Mientras este permanecía así, el S-13 no podía sumergirse. La calma de la tripulación se terminó al llegar un barco de guerra alemán.
The German battleship started right away to attack the S-13, which wasn't able to get underwater fast enough. The commander ordered the hatches closed and the ship to dive. They could hear the battleship's propellers.
Pero el agua poco profunda podía representar la pena de muerte para el S-13.
They tried to get us with depth charges. We ran so silently they couldn't hear us. The explosion underwater is so incredible you can feel it. We knew that if they hit us, it'd be all over. Everyone was so scared we'd be in these frozen poses. We put mattresses on the floor to absorb the noise in case something fell on deck. There was a lot of stress. I got under those mattresses and chewed on dried bread. My commander came over to me and told me to shut up because I was making too much noise.
El S-13 sobrevivió al ataque. A la mañana siguiente, el capitán marinesco reanudó su ronda. Entretanto, Adolfo Hitler se enteró de que el Gustlof, un preciado símbolo del Tercer Reich, había desaparecido y junto con él 9.300 alemanes. Hitler intentó ocultar la catástrofe al pueblo alemán, pero los diarios suecos reportaron al mundo la historia. Al regreso, increíblemente el capitán marinesco atacó de nuevo.
He was a skillful commanding officer. He did it. A few days later, he does it again.
Febrero de 1945. Tras haber hundido el Gustlof, el capitán marinesco prosiguió la cacería de barcos alemanes.
On patrol, he saw another huge liner that had the mission to evacuate wounded soldiers from the Eastern Front. It was impossible to tell where it was going, so he waited for it to come back.
Se trataba del Stuben. Dado su rumbo en dirección este e inmensa magnitud, el capitán marinesco supuso que transportaba tropas como el Gustlof y se le enviaba para evacuar alemanes al oeste, pero el Stuben era un buque hospital. La armada alemana aún creía que el verdadero peligro en el Báltico estribaba en las minas, no en los submarinos. Acompañado de un escolta, el Stuben zarpó el 9 de febrero con 4.000 soldados heridos y refugiados alemanes. Por lo general, la Cruz Roja del buque hospital evitaba que lo atacaran, pero no en aquella ocasión.
Given the adrenaline flow of the submariners in the Soviet submarines that had made it into the Baltic, given the weather conditions, the fact that it was night, the ships were not well lit, I would say it's argumentative whether they could even see the markings. By the same token, these were Soviets, those were Germans, and after what had happened between 1941 and 1944, shoot them, they're Germans.
Justo antes de la medianoche, el Stuben se topó con el S-13. Fyodor Davidov recuerda el ataque.
It was a more complicated attack. We shot torpedoes from the bow, but they missed. Then we turned the boat around and shot 2 more from the stern tubes. They hit. There were 2 explosions from the first 2 torpedoes, then several big explosions after that. Then, from the dark spot on the horizon, there was lots of fire.
Paul Niehaus era un marinero de a bordo.
At the time the ship was torpedoed, operations were being made in the hospital on board, operations of all kinds. The physicians, the doctors, had to abandon everything because the ship began to sink.
La mayoría de los 4.000 pasajeros del Stuben no sobrevivió. Horst Oppenberg era un oficial de 19 años en un torpedero que intentaba inútilmente rescatar sobrevivientes.
If I remember right, 3,500 people died, but this was due to the fact that they were all bedridden soldiers. They only had heavily wounded casualties almost on board, and there was very little rescue going on afterwards because these people were incapacitated, they couldn't move by themselves.
El capitán marinesco escapó con facilidad. 5 días más tarde, el submarino asesino de marinesco zarpó para bien del Golfo de Danzig y del Mar Báltico. La ronda del S-13 dio cuentas del mayor número de pérdidas de vidas en el mar. Casi 14.000 alemanes murieron, pero su gloria no duraría mucho tiempo. 8 de mayo de 1945. La Unión Soviética celebraba la derrota alemana. Soldados y marineros desfilaban triunfantes a través de la Plaza Roja de Moscú, pero Marinesco no había sido invitado.
Marinesco never got the recognition he wanted, and which he certainly deserved. Penetrating the minefields, taking his ship on a patrol in the Baltic, sinking 2 enemy ships with the tremendous impact that must have had when the German High Command learned of the casualties.
Él era considerado una vergüenza, no un héroe.
He had a reputation as a drunkard, visiting houses of ill repute, running his submarine his way and not necessarily the Navy way. But to my mind, his accomplishments, that man certainly deserved high recognition from the Soviet Navy, the Soviet government.
En su lugar, Marinesco fue encarcelado en Siberia en 1946. ¿Su delito? Permitir que un amigo tomara ladrillos de una obra de construcción. A su retorno, era un hombre deshecho con problemas de salud.
After the war, anything that was on their record, any blemish, was often used by the NKVD, the state security force, to imprison the people. They wanted no one who wasn't perfect in their post-war, their new society. And he certainly wasn't perfect.
Encontró empleo en una fábrica automotriz y pasó el resto de su vida en el olvido. En 1963, a la edad de 50 años, el capitán Alexander Marinesco murió, olvidado por el Estado, pero recordado por sus víctimas.
For many years, I couldn't sleep at night, always having dreams of that disasters. I never will forget those cries for help of children, of women. It was an experience I never will forget.
I can still feel my stomach going in a knot, and it just upsets me, and it makes me all uncomfortable, and I just want to get away from it. And I'm like an ostrich. I just want to hide my head from it, you know. And it's there. It's such a big chunk of my life, but I don't visit that spot very often.